Boom. Welcome to Talk to Him, a weekly show where we discuss self help strategies, pop culture, music, education, fashion, relationships, and how it all links to financial success. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Talk to Him J. Of course, I'm your host for this show. My name is James Levac. Talk to Him. Vibe with me. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest in the studio with us today. I met this brother at a pop up shop where it was just, and he was talking about his newsletter, and then he started, just talking, what I mean, just regular conversation, and I was like, man, this my man right here has just great knowledge, and I was like, in the back of my mind, I was like, yo, I gotta, gotta get him on the show, gotta get him on to talk to him. So I got my main man Chaka. Chaka, how you doing, brother?
Fine, thank you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. And of course, I had to bring him into with us today, and I like to call him a historian. You know what I mean? Like this brother right here just got so much knowledge, so much just wisdom, man, and it's backed up by actual facts too. It's backed up by actual facts. So Shaka, that's such a strong name, man. Shaka. Where does that name originate from?
South Africa.
South Africa.
And it would originally belong to King Shaka Zulu,
Mm.
who historically is a very important figure in the development of South Africa, and
Mhm.
particularly the Zulu people.
Mm.
Shaka, a very great, very great character.
Yeah.
He, when he ascended to the leadership, to the top leadership of, for lack of a better term, the Zulu tribe,
Yeah.
he, in a period of 12 years, increased their territory from 12 miles to over 120,000 miles.
Really.
And this was without horses or guns in that period of time. And we're talking like around, um, for the mid 1800s, say like maybe from 1860
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Shaka welded the Zulu people into a nation,
Mm-hmm.
and in the process of their expansion and development, they united a lot of the South African, and I have to use this word, the South African tribes into one gigantic nation,
Mm.
mainly using military methods.
Really.
So Shaka, not only was he personally, um, for lack of a better term, a great leader,
Yeah.
okay, he was also, when it came down to personal hand-to-hand combat, he was an excellent martial artist.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy, man. Like, you don't really hear that much about Shaka Zulu. You know what I mean? You don't really hear. It's not. It's almost like he's not promoted like that. You know what I mean? And of course, it's a little bit before our time. You know what I mean? But you know, we don't really. I heard about it a little bit. You know what I mean? When I was in elementary school. You know what I mean? Reading the Shaka Zulu book, I do remember that. But after that, I didn't really know anything about Shaka Zulu until like you was putting me on game.
Okay. Well, the account that I have to give here is kind of shallow, but in the uh, 1980s,
Hmm.
I think like 1986, a company did a miniseries on Shaka Zulu.
Really?
Yeah, and it's still available. I think you can order it on Amazon,
Yeah.
and it's pretty accurate with regard to uh, his growth development, the forces that framed his development
Yeah.
and how he took those same forces and created the Zulu Nation.
Zulu Nation.
And to this day, even in the reconciliation of South Africa, the Zulus have been given their own territory.
Mm.
And the Zulus are very similar to another great nation of folks, the Mongols.
The Mongols.
So just as the East had to come to grips with the Mongols and give them their own territory, which I think is now considered Inner Mongolia, the Zulus have their own territory. I'm not too familiar with the name of it right now,
Right.
but it's because, historically speaking, these are two groups of people you don't want to agitate or get upset. So the best thing to do would be to give them their, the political, how do you say, the political reconciliations was to give them their own territory and let them govern themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Wow.
And but Chaka, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you putting us on right now, bro. Because a lot of times people hear about Shaka Zulu, people know about it, you know what I mean, but they don't really understand the history and what this man really did for the people. So let me ask you this before we actually get into this. You've been giving me homework, bro. You know what I'm saying? You've been giving me a lot of homework to actually do, and one of the things that you talked about and you asked me to research and just look upon it a little bit was the Mossville, Louisiana. You know what I mean? The Mossville, Louisiana documentary, right? And I did not get a chance to watch the documentary, but I did YouTube it, right? And let me ask you this, right? In the Mossville, if you haven't heard about Mossville, please make sure you research it, Google it. It's called the Mossville documentary. And correct me if I'm wrong, this was an all-black community.
Yes.
Right? And then environmentalists just started putting out things that can basically kill the community.
Well,
go into it a little bit. Put me on. Yes.
A little bit, yeah. Well, Mossville is a small, predominantly African American, unincorporated community on the outskirts of Lake Charles in Calcasio Parish, Louisiana, in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And it was part of what they call the Lake Charles Metropolitan Statistical Area, and is sandwiched between Sulphur to the west and Westlake to the east.
Yep.
Okay. Now, it was founded by former slaves in the 1790s. And Mossville was one of the first communities of free black people in the South.
Wow.
Okay.
So this was before Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Way before Tulsa.
So a lot of people have heard it. They talk about, Tulsa, Oklahoma, but this was before Tulsa, Oklahoma, this whole Mossville. Make sure you look that up. This Mossville documentary. This is serious stuff. Continue on, bro. Go.
Sure. The issue with Mossville is Mossville became a case study in environmental justice, and what they call environmental racism. Okay, it's pointed out that Mossville, how can I explain this? Mossville was a free, black, prospering community established in the 1790s on up to basically until the present.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And excuse my pauses.
No, it's all right, bro. Yeah, you know.
Mossville was, for lack of a better term, its surrounding areas was, I'll have to use the word invaded, okay, by a South African petrochemical plant that developed its system for the creation of rocket, products like airplane fuel, rocket fuels, and other types of petrochemicals.
Yeah.
In the process of its development, it slowly was granted more territory by the Louisiana government and began to, in the process of developing its products, began to literally poison the community out of existence.
Wow.
Okay.
Let me ask you this, right? Why did they have to build it at that specific territory? You know what I mean? In their community. You think that was? I mean, I'm guessing that was possibly like, okay, that was purposely planned.
Well, I suspect that for business purposes, when the survey was done, that was seen as the best area to establish that type of business. Okay, to establish that that type of facility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the thing about the company, and I don't have the exact name of the company. Maybe we could do another session specifically devoted to environmental racism, and I can have more information available.
Yeah.
Okay, but this company basically, in the process of its development and its proliferation, African Americans in that community had to contend with increasing levels of environmental pollution to the point where it began causing cancer, other types of neurological and biological diseases in the inhabitants. Okay, to the point where the community had to leave.
Wow.
The black people that were there, the free black community that was there, basically got no support from the state. Okay, and essentially had to leave. Many of the community members passed away from these diseases. And some suffered genetic disorders. Okay, and a host of other diseases.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And had no choice but to leave. Some of the homes and properties were bought out at unfair terms. Okay, right. because the situation was so terrible that the local residents had to accept. Okay, what was offered to them or nothing at all.
Wow.
Okay, and there was a documentary done by WGBH. I think you mentioned it.
Yeah. I didn't watch the whole thing, by the way. I didn't watch. I watched a little bit of it, but I didn't watch the whole thing. One thing that I wanted to say though is that, like, it seems that, and this is not like a race thing or anything like that, because we're rocking with a historian right now, and it just seems like to me, like, people of color, right, black folks, it seems that we've always found a way to create our own little community, you know what I mean? And most of the time it's prospering, right? It's prospering, but then all of a sudden, boom, something always happens. You know what I mean? Whether it's environmentalists coming in, growing in some crazy stuff, trying to kill the community, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you know what I mean? Like, let me just ask you, right? Because this is Talk to Him, and we like to speak the truth over here, right? Like, do you think like these things are, do you think it's just fear of other races that, hey, if these people were ever to get their stuff together, right, and become a community and become united, we have a problem. So we're going to have to make sure that we kill that off.
Well,
let me just get your opinion on that.
No, I agree. I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
In answering a question like that, it's really easy to step over into becoming a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
So my answer is going to have to be pretty, how do you say, the wrinkles are going to have to be ironed out in the right places.
I got you,
Deeper discussion on these issues, I believe, should take place okay, but how it's presented to the public, okay, has to be
In a certain type of way.
it has to be in a certain type of way that it's impactful and
Yeah.
it gives the knowledge. It doesn't water down the actual facts, okay, but doesn't make the presenters look like we're just another brand of conspiracy theorists.
I got you.
So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Second, after slavery, there were tremendous amounts of economic activity, okay, by former slaves, okay, and also by African Americans that went through that whole slave period without being slaves. Okay, we're not told about those.
Really?
Yeah. There were some African Americans that even owned slaves. Okay, we're not told much about that. Okay.
So all the slaves was not slaves.
All the black people.
All the black people were not slaves.
Well, we'll say like maybe 3 to 5% that lived in the South weren't slaves.
Okay.
Okay.
And how come they how come they did not? How come they weren't slaves?
That's a historically more research on that. The research is available.
Yeah.
I just never really focused on that much.
Yeah, yeah.
Just
yeah.
to know that they were there was a plus.
Yeah.
Okay. And then to consider like how did they navigate that entire period?
Right.
9 times out of 10, like other situations, connections, political connections, financial connections,
Right.
and they probably occupied a small niche, where slavery, where they wasn't affected or couldn't be affected by. I know this is a real general explanation.
Yeah. No.
okay?
No. No. Absolutely.
But it's a small niche where they, couldn't be affected by the historical scenarios at the time. Okay? But with the free black communities, okay, they're the first one of the big things that kind of escapes. It's documented, but kind of escapes public exposure is with, I think it was called the Freedmen's Bank.
Freedmen's Bank.
Yeah, where the federal government at that time provided funds for the economic survival and possibly expansion of former slaves.
Wow.
Okay, and it handled and screwed up billions of dollars of money designated to help free slaves or ex-slaves.
Yeah.
Okay, very similar to the way that the Bureau of Indian Affairs messed up the assistance coming from the federal government to go to the Native Americans.
Wow.
Okay, but a lot more. There's some other things about what happened to the Native Americans that are really horrible and tragic that recently has come to light. Okay, but the same thing occurred with the Freedmen's Bank, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There were attempts. But nonetheless, okay, African American entrepreneurship, okay, designs and activities for economic development, economic and social development did occur. Okay, along with Tulsa. Okay, the Tulsa, Oklahoma Black Wall Street was one of several Black Wall Streets.
Wow.
Okay, and I have a small list of some others. There were more than just the list I'm going to present.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
give me a second.
while you get that, we're gonna go right into our sponsors. Okay. We're gonna go right into our sponsors. Shout out to everybody that's that's rocking with us online. All right, really appreciate you guys. Our sponsors. Shout out to the good folks over at Talk to 'Em Apparel, Green to Clean, at at Green to Clean Ltd. Community Capital Gains. All right. Shout out to the good folks over at LEG. Okay. And then also shout out to Eats with Ree. She just celebrated her birthday. Big happy birthday to you. And I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, big shout out to my main man Quinda, man. You know what I mean? Because we were shooting this episode. Thought I'd show my man love. He got some real amazing apparel. You know what I mean? So I had to show my man some love. All right. So yeah, go ahead. Finish telling us, bro.
Okay. Tulsa, Oklahoma was not the only Black Wall Street.
Right.
Okay. The history of other such districts nationwide is still not widely known beyond their home cities. But there were many. Just to give a few. In Chicago, there was Bronzeville. In Durham, North Carolina, there was Haiti, spelled Hayti.
Wow.
Okay. In Atlanta, it was called Sweet Auburn. Okay. In Little Rock, Arkansas, there was one called West 9th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And in Jackson, Mississippi, there was one called Ferris Street.
Wow.
Okay, and that's just a sample of a few of the independent Black economic efforts, right, that were historical, that were thriving, and it also met with degrees of decimation. Okay, now it's been recently exposed that Tulsa, Oklahoma was decimated supposedly by just a white mob. Okay, but during that period of time, there were a series of what they call race riots. Okay,
Right.
and the race riots weren't always they were depicted as interracial conflict, white mobs launching on African American towns and African American business enterprises, but it's certain things come to light that have to be explored,
Right.
okay, and have to be considered. For instance, America and the West at that time were in the process of what they call imperialist domination or imperialist expansion.
What's that?
Now, a lot of those words are often associated with like left wing, okay, or say like a communist or Marxist like activity, but they were real. And they weren't invented by the Marxists or the communists. They were invented by the people who actually did it, like Western banks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And particularly imperialism was a system designed by Europeans to invade Africa and other parts of the world, accumulate, dominate territory, and control the economy. Okay. One of the things that people need to understand about racism is that racism never existed without economic exploitation. Okay, so, and that's something to all that we'll touch on like a little later.
Right.
Okay, but racism wasn't just about the color of your skin. It was also about controlling, dominating the territory, and dominating the economy for the profit and benefit of the so-called central countries.
So in that case, black folks, like people of color, could never be racist. Could never be racist because we never really had the power like that, right?
Okay, that's a good question,
Right.
and that should be separated out for another discussion.
Okay.
Because what you just described is a lot of people, how do you say, they confuse two concepts that are like a thin line but a big difference.
Right.
Prejudice and racism.
Okay.
Okay, see, a lot of attitudes may be prejudicial, okay, but racism, it may reflect on attitudes, cultural attitudes toward other people,
Okay.
and things like that, and that comes a lot mainly out of ignorance or out of a purpose, because you're gaming on them
Right.
for their resources.
Absolutely,
So you're
yeah.
going to develop these attitudes that demonize or down other people because you have something that they want and you're going after it.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
you have to desensitize yourself when you're going after other people's resources or taking what they have. Okay? Okay. Now, and basically that's setting up to steal from other folks. You
Okay.
label them the enemy,
Right.
which gives define the enemy, okay, which gives you the how do you say, the moral turpitude to be insensitive to crushing them, so you
Right.
can take what they have.
So you don't feel bad
So you don't
after
feel-
doing what you
okay.
do. Yeah.
You can
okay.
historically justify it.
I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
But that's, like I said, that's another larger scenario.
Yeah.
At the time of the development of post-slavery economic, the attempts to develop independent economic entities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have to look at that period of time, like around 1880 to maybe like 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
What was also going on around the world at that time? Okay, now here you have the beginning of, this is just one element. You have the beginning of the Great Depression.
Right.
Okay, where the Western world was losing, one of the biggest and greatest depressions. You had like a lot of like white people jumping out of windows because they lost their money,
Right.
killing themselves. The whole collapse of
I heard
Wall
about that.
Street
Wall
in
Street.
New
Yes.
York. Right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, that wasn't the first time that happened, but that was the one that's most notable. Okay, so you have that happen. You have what was going on. You had the Marcus Garvey movement talking about going back to Africa and developing economic enterprises to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What's unknown about that is you had a group called the Moorish Temple of Science, okay, that also was developing African American economic enterprises on smaller levels. You don't hear much about those. Okay, and just to throw something out there that I know is going to invite some other commentary, is that the Moorish Temple of Science actually was the root beginnings of the Nation of Islam.
Wow.
Okay, so but that's another.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a whole host of things that was going on. You have the Irish struggling against the British domination. Okay, because the same things that the Western countries did in Africa, they were also doing to other smaller groups of white people in Europe. Okay, the way the British dealt with the Irish, Scotland, and Wales, as they had them as colonies.
Yeah.
Okay, you had so you had that struggle going on. Okay, and particularly the Irish Rebellion of 1816. Okay, you had of 1916. Okay, the Irish Rebellion of 1916, very, very important. Okay, you had the Mother Jones movement
What's
of
Mother Jones? What's that?
Irish miners in the United States.
Okay.
Okay, and at the same time you had the sharecropping system was breaking up, so you had like a lot of African Americans moving north, leaving the South, moving north. Okay, and the movement of Irish miners for you also had the beginnings of I'll get back to the Irish miners in a second, but you also had the beginnings of union movements. Okay, you had different types of socialist movements attempting to become established in the United States. You had in China, okay,
Wow.
in China you had how do you say, this was right after what they would call the Boxer War. Okay, where you had literally martial arts groups fighting Western imperialism. You had French, Germans, British, the United States in China trying to snatch off a piece of China. And this literally is after the Boxer Rebellion occurred after the Boxer Rebellion was an attempt to kick out what they called foreign devils or foreign imperialists that were grabbing their countries. And that's how Hong Kong got grabbed by the British, okay, from the Chinese.
Wow.
Okay, and was held for 100 years before recently, a few years ago, it was ceded back to the Chinese. Now, this is what was that period of time. Now, keep in mind, this is right after, in China, the second Opium War. Basically, the West, okay, turned China into one big crack house, selling their people opium, okay, because, and particularly it's notable the British.
Wow.
The British in selling opium and creating such a huge problem of opium addiction, they were siphoning off silver, because the center of the British economy is the sterling. What is it? Sterling pounds, I think. Pound sterling silver.
Yeah.
Sterling. I forgot what they call it, but they were extracting a lot of silver coming out of China. The Chinese had to fight two wars
Wow.
to kick the Western European drug dealers out of China.
Wow.
Which makes this whole big drug thing kind of hypocritical, okay, the way it's termed and dealt with, like in the United States and in the Western world,
Yeah.
knowing what preceded before that.
Wow. So who was the real drug dealers?
Okay. Then you have imperialism and control and colonial control of Africa was increasing, but you had struggles against that beginning to develop. You had the Marcus Garvey movement enlightening a lot of black people in the United States about their African ancestry, and that it's actually positive, okay, and that there is a way out of that. You even had in Britain repatriation movements, okay, that established the British colony of Sierra Leone, which were Sierra Leone was slaves that were from British colonies reestablished back into Africa. Okay, in the United States, I forget the name.
I'm gonna stop you right there.
Sure.
Right? I'm gonna stop you right there because you know what time it is right now. It's trivia time. All right, so we got some trivia for you. Okay, we got some trivia for you. So hopefully you get this now. Okay, we know you are a historian. Can you name 3 historical black colleges in Virginia?
Not off the top. I'll be honest with you.
One of them is H. One of them starts with an H. I'll give you it starts with an H.
Hampton.
Hampton is one of them. Okay.
Okay.
What's another one? One of them is a V and then a U.
Virginia State University.
Virginia Union, and then one of them is an N. Starts with an N and it ends with a state. There's a street out here in Boston. Name it.
Wow.
On
Norfolk.
Norfolk.
Okay.
Norfolk. Okay. Norfolk State. All right. Here we go. All right. I got one for you.
Hampton University, Virginia Union University.
No, you can't be looking at that. You can't be looking. You can't. Well, you can't be looking on your phone.
Refresher.
You can't be
refresher.
You can't be looking on your phone. Okay. All right. Here we go. Hey, you can't be looking over here too.
Okay.
Who is the leader of the Nation of Islam?
Well, first it was Elijah Muhammad.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then Malcolm X.
Yep.
And under Malcolm X, wow, I really, because he's been the
he's been there for a little bit.
Yeah,
now.
and that was
starts with an F.
Farrakhan. But that was just as the Nation of Islam broke into 2 parts.
Wow.
Wallace Dean Muhammad, okay, one of Elijah Muhammad's other sons, created a more orthodox version of the Nation of Islam.
Get out of here,
and
really?
The 2 existed like side by side.
Wow.
Yeah, for a while. They were kind of at odds with each other for different reasons.
Wow. So you see, folks, we have, if you're just tuning in right now, we have, my man said, my man Pete, he had him, okay? If you're just tuning in right now, we have my man Chaka, one of the greatest minds, one of the brightest minds that we have out here, and we have to make sure that, we when we get in the presence of these people, we just sit down and we just listen. You know what I mean? I like to call him, he's an historian, because he's just giving us a lot of facts about our history. And not to mention, he has this incredible newsletter that I was able to read, and while I was reading the newsletter, there's so much history that goes into that, because I remember you was talking about, slaves and just the whole African American history, just the struggle, that we've had. And during that newsletter, I saw that I read in your newsletter, you mentioned there was a seasoning process, right? There was a seasoning process after the African people were captured, right? Can you explain to us what that seasoning process was?
Sure. Can I hold that for a second?
Yeah, go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
At the time that Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
and the other Black Wall Streets were being, some of them were decimated by riots, very similar to what happened in Tulsa, and other types of military activity. Okay, and all the other struggles that were going on in the world really made it kind of embarrassing for African American, Black, independent, economic and political entities to exist. Because here you have these freed slaves now, and they're moving into positions and developing their own economies. And what if they decide to use this as a basis for developing political influence?
Yeah.
What if they decide to use this as a basis for developing more independent, anti-American or not American attitudes and developments?
Mm-hmm.
See, so with all the other things that I mentioned, what was going on in China, what was happening in Africa, what was happening in the United States, we also got to remember what was the Great Depression that was occurring in the United States. We also got to remember the other great economic and semi-political military, and I have to use these words, military entity that existed. The Italian Mafia. Particularly with the prohibition on alcohol.
Yep.
That was an enterprise that brought in millions and billions. How it got distributed, that's another issue. And the fact that it was illegal, alcohol at that time was illegal.
Yeah.
And it was not just the Italians that was promoting illegal alcohol, but also in the South. You had the moonshiners. And that's why they called the cops that went down to stifle the Southern alcohol trade were called revenuers. They were tax cops.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And even today, illegal drugs. And this is important to understand. The illegality of the drugs is based on the tax schedules, not based on the harm that it does to your body or the poison that it does to your body, because nothing in the Constitution keeps you from putting anything in your body. However, other types of problems that occurred from control of these substances that were outside of the control of the government or weren't taxable created other types of problems. And I know I'm being very, very general, with this, because like you said, we have a limited amount of time. So all this stuff was going on simultaneously, and to understand what's affecting African American people, you have to understand what's going on in the rest of the world at the same time.
Right.
One factor that I like is at the same time of the Emancipation Proclamation, which is kept very, very, they talk about Juneteenth, which is kind of an embarrassment, but I'll leave that alone for right now. What folks don't realize is that at the same time Abraham Lincoln engineered through Congress the Emancipation Proclamation, the Russian Tsar passed an edict freeing serfs, which basically Russian peasants, from serfdom. Serfdom basically was 1/8 of a step up from slavery, for lack of a better term. Okay. Yeah. Simultaneous events, worlds apart, that appear to have no connection. But they do. So you have all these things going on, simultaneously, and here you have we were one of the most oppressed groups, in the world, undergoing economic self-development. And you have a lot of modern people, black people today, don't understand that, have a negative attitude about the failed attempts, that they've only been exposed to.
Right, yeah.
So we don't have anything to be ashamed of. We got a lot to be proud of, because we did it in the face of
so much
constant
Yeah.
Adversity is the
Right.
word that you used.
Yeah.
Okay, so just wanted to clear that part up.
Absolutely.
So you were saying about the other?
So
The
we're talking
seasoning
about
process.
the seasoning process. So in your newsletter, right? Before we even get into that, I really wanted to know what like urged you, or what was the spark that was like, yo, you know what, I'm gonna start writing about this into my newsletter. What gave you just that, just the urge to just do it? You know what I mean? Just get that thought, because you somebody that knows a lot. You know what I mean? But to actually put it on paper, it's a lot of work. You know what I mean? It's not just like one page. It's a lot of work. You know what I mean? So what was the spark? What was the behind that?
Well, actually, I've been involved in certain levels of African American politics for a very long time.
Okay.
Okay, and I've come to know some of the unsung heroes that are actually pillars of our modern progress that folks don't, that are basically the unsung.
Right.
Okay,
They
we
don't
don't
even
know
talk
much
about
them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the time, the knowledge, um, and my involvement, the time that these people that I had, working around these folks, very very inspirational, and um, it's and what little consciousness, or what consciousness about our race, culture, history, development processes that we've been involved in, and the opposition to those processes,
Yeah.
are all a part not only of an African American, for lack of a better term, African American developmental dynamic. Okay, because we're developing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we're constantly developing. Okay, and sometimes development is like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, what we've been educated around mainly has been the 2 steps back,
Yeah.
not 3 steps forward.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
but there are legacies that keep. There are legacies. There's how do you say? And I have to use this word with what I call historical echoes, that people understand things and know things by context, okay, but not exactly sure where they learned it from.
Right.
Okay, and
Yeah.
it okay, and one of the things is under having a view of history is main academic, and again this is very general, but main academic, how do you say, paradigms, historical paradigms of history,
Mm-hmm.
is the great man theory, or the great person theory, or the great event theory, or a combination of the two. Okay, that there's an event that spurs, certain time, that spurs a certain type of historical social recognition that moves
Yeah.
society in a certain direction,
Yeah.
or it's a person or a group of people or organizations of folks who basically smarter than anybody else, smarter than everybody else, has their hands on and while a lot of people wish it was like that, it's not like that. History is millions and millions of people every day struggling to provide a life
Right.
for themselves and for their offspring,
Yeah. Yeah.
and for the communities and people around.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the progression of history. Okay, it's the total.
Right.
Okay, you have a great ocean, but the way that Western history is been, how do you say, sanitized, packaged, and delivered, makes you think that one current in the wave of the Atlantic Ocean is history.
Right. Yeah. 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 That's true.
And we have to broaden our way of seeing that.
Yeah.
Okay, and not falling for that. But the other side is, I used to work for group homes, so a lot of my assignments were like 11 to 7 a.m.s or 12 a.m. to 9 a.m.s or double shifts, and literally 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, when you got all you could out of MSNBC and CNN, right?
Right.
It'll be a big gap before the shift's over. So I had a lot of writing time.
Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
And I was able to, just to, use that time to gather my thoughts, along with I say about 4 or 5 cups of coffee.
Yeah.
Gather my thoughts and get them down on paper.
Nah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I've always had. Uh, I mean, in my community organizing practice, in other professional situations that I've been in, I've seen people actually attempt to do the best that's within them, but they actually didn't have the information to make it substantial.
I got you. Yeah.
Okay. So, and that created, how can I say? It created questionable solutions, okay, or solutions that didn't last.
Yeah.
Because one of the key things about a solid historical development, okay, and I may go a little afield in trying to explain this.
No, I'm with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's in line with true historical development, it'll last. If it doesn't, it's just a fad. It'll come, it may have an impact for a while, and then it'll
just disappear. Yeah.
It'll disappear.
Yeah.
Right? Or you'll have generations of folks constructing their realities in their day-to-day beliefs and realities around a lie. And if I can have a little leeway.
Yeah.
For instance, the pyramids. The Egyptian pyramids.
Yeah.
People believe that Jewish slaves had a lot, or Hebrew slaves had a lot to do with the development of the Egyptian pyramids.
No.
Okay. And Hollywood, and for lack of a better term, Hollywood and other other entities
Right.
Cultivate this. The reality is this. When the the Hebrews were brought into Egypt, they weren't brought in as slaves.
No.
Okay. You had organized economies, or what they call empires, in those periods of times, right? They all had barbarians on their doorstep, for lack of a better term, or folks that weren't out a part of their civilizations.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of them killed the barbarians on their frontiers. The Romans killed the Huns. Okay. The Huns were the barbarians on the Roman. The Huns were the barbarians on the Roman frontier. The Mongols were the barbarians on the Chinese frontier. Okay, and other great civilizations at the time probably had. Okay, the Egyptians were the only ones that didn't kill the barbarians on their frontier. They let them in. They let them into their civilizations. But what are you going to do when you have an organized economy and you allowing in a group of people who basically
are barbarians?
Were sheep herders.
Yeah.
Okay, because the whole thing about the Hebrews is that they wandered around Western Asia, okay, looking for oases to propagate their flocks. Okay, where you have in Egypt, you have an organized, highly technical for that period of time civilization. Okay, so they let them in, and one of the things they did is they put them to work. But in the Bible, in other books, you hear them complaining about they were forced to make bricks. Okay, the Egyptians put them to work making their own housing. They used mud and straw to make the bricks. Well, that is adobe. Okay, that's one of the best building materials for that climate.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, and they put them to work making their own, developing their own economies, minor economies. The pyramids, the reason the pyramids and other Egyptian monuments took so long to build, because of this. The Nile flooded. First of all, the Egyptian economy was based on agriculture.
Right.
Okay. So about a good 90% of the population, farmers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or fishermen, but mainly farmers. The Nile Valley flooded once a year. So about a good portion of the year, everything was underwater.
Wow.
What are you going to do with a farming population when there's no farm, where there's no land to farm?
Mm-hmm. None.
You
Can't
put
do
them to
nothing.
work
Yeah.
building public works,
Okay.
which were the pyramids and other monuments were.
Right.
They were public works. How did they pay for that? When the Nile Valley, when the waters receded, the silt that was left behind was so rich, you could have 3 growing seasons in a 6-month period of time.
Mm.
That's how rich the soil was and how fertile Egypt was.
Right.
Okay? So, tax collector could take 2/3 of the produce, and the 1/3 that was left could feed the family on up until the next flooding cycle.
Okay.
And that, okay? So you had basically the farmers who couldn't work because the land was flooded, working on building the pyramids and working on the other monuments. That's why they didn't need slave labor.
Wow.
They had a workforce. Right? And 2, you had to have skills to be able to work on those, okay, monuments. So a lot of the folks were, they multitasked. They weren't just, like you have, say you have a contractor. Contractor may have a modern contractor may have one employee that's an electrician and a sheetrock worker.
Okay.
Or an electrician, or you may have they may have different skills that they can use at different phases of the construction process of the building or the project that they're working on.
Got it.
It's the same thing.
Mm.
Okay? And second, what society that you know has ever, in the history of the world, allowed foreign people to come in that don't have any skills, okay, and make them equal to your own population?
Right.
They never did. It might not be fair.
Yeah, let me ask you this
It's
though.
not slick.
All right, let me ask you this. Do you think so?
I just
Was that a smart thing, or was that? I don't think that was very smart.
What?
You know, to allow those people to come into their community and basically, kind of like allow them to work and be a part of their community. You know.
Okay, well, what they did, the work that they did, mainly after they constructed their own projects
Right.
or housing, you know, and whenever you construct housing, you have many economies that go on inside the housing.
Absolutely.
We might not know what they are. We know what some of them are. We don't know what all of them are, right? But they're thriving.
Yeah.
They may not be thriving at the same level of,
You gotta come
you know,
into.
They may not be thriving at the same level of the indigenous population who basically are all set in the economies and norms of the society they live in, but they're not starving either.
Okay.
And then you have Egypt being one of the only that had humanity. Okay, and because it was a spiritual society, because it was basically its whole professional class and middle class were priests. It was a priesthood.
Mm.
Okay, they believed in.
You had a little something.
Oh,
right there.
okay. So they believed in spirituality, you know, spiritual recognition and things. You know, even though it wasn't, how do you say, it wasn't in line with the way Christianity has developed and viewed it.
Right.
Okay. Why Ramses, the king that had all the problems with the Jews, didn't just want to let them go? That was stupid. He should, in my opinion, he should just, if they wanted to leave, you know, after they paid up all their bills, did all the calculations, okay, you're free to go. Okay, or he could have done what a lot of societies do, you know, support their colonization somewhere else. Okay, see, and that's what's whole messed up about that, because it's not like these ancient the rulers and the business people, the priesthood of these ancient civilizations were stupid.
No.
Okay, so so that history is a little screwed up as to why they didn't support, you know, their colonization somewhere else. It's a lot of, you know, and we're covered. And I just wanted to give that or present that scenario to show like how we're exposed to layers of lies
Right.
that have confused our thinking and confused our ability to see clearly with certain historical issues that still impact, okay, our beliefs today.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Can you give us an example? Give us an example.
well, that was one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, with the other one is, and this one may cause some controversy. Okay, the Germans and the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay. The Huns, okay, victims of the Roman Empire. Okay. Well, the Huns were. It was a time when it was a great migration west.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was pushed by other forces. Okay, so different tribes were forced west.
Right.
Okay, the Huns were at the tail end of that westward, that forced westward migration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they ran into the frontier of the Roman Empire. The Roman legions, after slaughtering untold numbers of them, okay, they decided to have some type of treaty,
Mm-hmm.
okay, with the Roman Empire. And this is really general. And I just want to emphasize that these accounts are really, really general.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But if you do your research, you'll be able to narrow down the points that I'm generally speaking about.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the treaty was to bring some of the Huns into the Roman military, use some of them as slaves, okay? And slavery in ancient days was big, really, really big business.
Right.
Bigger business than it is than what we know as modern slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Maybe. Okay. The Jews or the Hebrews or the Jews that followed the Romans from Western Asia, from Jerusalem, back to Italy or
Mhm.
back to the Roman Empire, were the middlemen in the ancient slave trade.
Mm.
They're the ones that did a lot of brokering, okay, of the ancestors of the modern Germans.
Wow.
That's why Hitler and them, Hitler was a nut. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to justify anything that he did.
Right.
But there are historical reasons for these things that have been mystified,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
and have been included into layers of lies. Okay. So we keep making some kind of association with what happened to the ancient Hebrews in ancient Egypt and what happened to them with modern Germany. And this connection is
It's not it.
it's
Yeah.
not it.
Yeah.
But it's what's constantly projected. Okay. Okay. And it's kind of dangerous to put that out there because this is a blanket. This concept is almost like a blanket of concrete in world consciousness.
Wow.
So to say something like that, I hope we're not walking around with target signs on us now.
No, we're not.
Okay. Okay, but I'm just saying, right? This and other types, right, of layers of lies, right, are what we're fed, and people rather create all types of issues rather than come to a real realization.
Let me ask you this, right? And because in the newsletter you mentioned we were forced to forget, right? There's a term that you use. You said you said we were forced to forget. Now we voluntarily forget.
Okay.
Right? Do you remember that? You wrote it, of course.
Yeah.
Right. But I just thought that was like a powerful, like a powerful phrase. You know what I mean? What and also what did we forget?
Okay.
You know, what was that we forgot?
It's okay. African religions,
Yeah.
okay, were one. this the whole issue of religions is it's it has been turned into a mush,
Right.
for lack of a better term. Every religion thinks that they are the one.
Right.
Okay. And religious wars, like wars over land, wars over territory,
Mm-hmm.
wars over economics, they come and go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, land grabbing, stuff like that. Right? But religious wars last forever, literally. Okay, in the like the 80s, I think, with the whole thing in Yugoslavia. Okay, see, we don't even remember that.
I don't
right?
remember that. Yeah.
Right, a lot of folks don't even remember that. Okay, the whole thing with Yugoslavia, you had it was one of the biggest issues that President Clinton, and them had, and it was and slowly filtered down to the population, was groups of people that settled in those areas since the Crusades. It made peace with
Yeah.
each other, Muslims and Christians. They were still those underlying tensions and frictions, by some again Hitler-like nut, were reactivated.
Wow.
And you had, again, Muslims and Christians fighting each other, okay, in a territory that it was peaceful since World War II. See, Yugoslavia, what they call the Baltics, okay, and it's not even mentioned anymore,
Mm.
okay, and I raised that just to show like how how certain things can be cultivated and sustained, and turned into a low burning fire.
Absolutely.
Until political situations are ripe, okay, to have them flare up. Okay. Part of the seasoning process was to, for lack of a better term, create a psychological injury to the populations that were becoming slaves, create psychological injuries and break the willpower of these folks who were scheduled to become slaves. Okay, and part of that was imposing another religion on them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what racism is. Racism is the imposition, the imposing of one culture on another culture. Okay, disregarding anything that the people you're victimizing. It turned in a whole other culture into victims.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And part of that is, this has happened throughout history, replacing one religion with another religion,
Right.
because the culture, the values, the organization, the social organization, all that stuff gets replaced.
Yo, man, speaking of religions, right? I, as you're speaking about that, I'm thinking about all these denominations. Yo, you know what I mean? In Christianity, all these denominations. I'd be like, yo, why are all these denominations? Like, aren't we all serving the same God? Ain't we all like really supposed to be on the same squad? Why is there's like this denomination, there's that denomination? That's at a point it gets me confused, and I'm like, come on, man. What's up, Jesus? Do you got all this?
Well, they didn't. The religious figures and the religious geniuses didn't cause that.
No.
Generally, a lot of those political divisions and things are caused by the priesthood, who basically profiting in status or money or power.
Got it.
From those little breakdowns.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's more than that. Probably we could do another session on that one.
Yeah.
But with African religions, right? Okay, and see, this is kind of hard for black people here in the United States, and even in Caribbean cultures, and even in some African cultures, to remember this, because of the monolithic hammer that modern Christianity and Islam has slammed on these cultures, right? But when your original African religions were formed, it was when you were free and constructive. Okay. Free. Your original religion contains your race memory of being free. Mm-hmm. We don't know what that is anymore. We don't even have a concept of what that could be. But that's what it was. It was when you The reason it was so important is they were developed when, because they contained, like a database, they contain your race memory of being free.
Wow.
That's probably one of the reasons why slaves coming right out of slavery could tap into how they economically constructed things before they left Africa.
Right.
It's in your race memory.
Right.
And they were able to prosper.
Yeah.
Okay, and develop. And they didn't get destroyed because of bad economic decisions. They got destroyed because they were militarily assaulted. A riot is a military assault. It may not be an organized military, but when other people are facing you with guns, bombs, and bullets, that's the big M word.
Yeah.
Okay, so your race memory of being free probably contains a lot of data,
Yeah.
okay, that you could use to reconstruct reality.
Yeah.
And I hope okay, I'll put that out there. That may seem kind of far afield,
Yeah.
but that kind of stuff's not discussed much, right? Because we live so much now in the area of psychological problems that we don't even consider psychological freedoms.
Say that
All
again.
we know about is psychological problems. Everybody got mental health issues,
Yo,
but nobody has a is considered a psychological genius unless you're working for Amazon or for
Google or something. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yo, that's crazy that you said that.
And it's in all of us.
Yeah.
Okay, it's in us on varying levels. Okay, and you can see it, but it's exploited, couched, and put in how do you say, shaped in the mold of this reality.
Okay.
So it's hard to tell, and it's hard to tell, and hard to tell what it is, and hard to see unless you know what you're looking at.
Yo,
So, okay.
go ahead.
Okay, so again, when your original African religions were formed, it was when you were free and constructive. Your original religion contains your race memory of being free. This is not an easy concept to explain. Free is more than not having your personal life unreasonably restricted. See what I'm saying? That's what we keep thinking. Okay, your personal life is unreasonably restricted, and therefore somebody's messing with you.
Right.
Okay, or you're being oppressed, right?
Yeah.
That personal freedom we are all supposed to enjoy is simply one definition of liberty. And liberty means you do what you want to do as long as you don't get caught.
Yo, that was one of my questions that I had actually, right? It was freedom and liberty, right? Is that the same thing, or is there... See, I told you I was reading, bro. You know what I'm saying? See, is that the same thing, or is there a difference?
Okay. Now, I'd have to refer to you to a political science professor teaching poli-sci 303.
Oh, Chaka, more homework.
No, I'm just joking, right? But they would be the ones able to answer that question
a little bit more, yeah.
Okay, philosophically. But freedom meant you were living, moving, and developing as groups and individuals with the cultural support, the cultural liberties, in the patterns and cycles of pre-European African historical development. It is difficult to understand what this feels like, but it worked for thousands of years and it was ours. Every society and culture goes through a cyclical process.
Right.
Initiation, development, it peaks and it declines.
Right. Kind of like
Africa is no different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Africa, no different. Okay. Europeans made serious inroads into Africa at a point where one of the key African civilizations was in decline. Okay, you had Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, mainly Western African civilizations. Okay, went through the entire process during the 14th century. Okay, when some of the major European incursions, began to happen. It was, I think, when one of those civilizations, Ghana, Mali, or Songhai, was in a period of decline
Mm-hmm.
because it was like the last of not the last, but it was one of the pinnacle civilizations of that part of the world, and it was in the process of decline. I think it was Ghana. Okay, I may be wrong, about that, but they were pinnacle civilizations in Western Africa. The three I mentioned, there were pinnacle civilizations in Central Africa, and there were pinnacle civilizations in Eastern Africa, all going through these similar cyclical processes. Okay, the territorial structure of Africa that we see now was imposed by the European powers. It wasn't the territorial structure that we see now wasn't always the same. Okay, so the initiation, rise, pinnacle, and decline. Okay,
You
all
learn,
part of that.
speaking of that, you kind of learn the same thing in like business as well too. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the same system, the same cycle. I would say. You know what I mean? You peak, then you actually come out, and then you decline. Actually,
Yeah.
You know.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you have to be, and at the decline of one of these civilizations is when the Europeans came and when they were able to establish that foothold,
Yeah.
right? That created the modern problems that we have now. Okay, now this. Okay, so, but that's the whole thing, freedom and liberty.
Yeah.
Okay, but what that means is, okay, it's difficult to understand what this feels like, but it worked for thousands of years and it was ours. Okay, so another way to explain this is this: slavery means that we were forced out of our own historical cycles and put into somebody else's. Okay, which is why it seems like we always have a hard time as a large group establishing ourselves, because this is not our
Yeah,
historical
and
scenario.
Speaking of that, right? So Friday, I'm at kicking it with some friends, and we get into this discussion, right? This one girl, she's talking about, say like, I don't use the N word, you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I get it, I understand, you know what I mean? But I don't say like I constantly use the N word, but I'm not against somebody if that's how they want to express themselves. If that's how they choose to express themselves, right? Personally, I'm not. And then I said, you know what? To me, we have bigger issues than a word. You know what I mean? Because I feel like we give words power. You know what I mean? We're the one who gives word power. Because if it's not the N word, it could be, I don't know, what, porch monkey or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Something else. You know what I mean? So we're the one who's giving the words power. But then also, I'm telling her, like, yo, what are we doing as a community to build our own infrastructure, our own thing? We talking about like this word, like this is the biggest thing. You know what I'm saying? Okay, they got the word. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
One thing about that is, you're right, but there's conditioning and legacies of slavery that we haven't been able to get over yet.
Right.
And one of the words that I want to propose for that is we suffering from what's called cultural infections.
Right.
We have cultural infections. Just like you can have a biological infection, you can have mental health issues. We suffer from cultural infections.
Yeah.
And the word nigger is one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Every time we know, logically, we know that word was imposed on us by slavery.
Right.
Every time we use that word, we reconnecting with slavery.
Really?
Every time. There is no reason why we should say that. There is no good, positive reason. Even though celebrities have tried to make this normal,
Right.
Okay, by redefining it, sociologists, all of them have. There is, every time we use that word, we're reconnecting with slavery.
Yeah. I mean, most of the time in today's, we're not really using that word like that. It's more like king, peace king,
Right.
queen, you know what I mean? So, but every now and then, if I see a brother doing something, this nigga.
Well, see, I don't mean,
You know what I mean?
but I don't mean
Like this nigga, right?
see, but that's not what I mean.
Okay, yeah,
I don't mean
yeah.
you got to remember that trying to discard with certain things is like and this may sound far-field,
Yeah.
but trying to discard with certain things that are cultural infections are like trying to tell us not to use a toilet
Right.
anymore.
Right.
We've been trained in this culture to use that particular implement in the bathroom, and it has very useful reasons,
I got a
purposes.
I got a couple comments. And
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
No,
Good.
but you can finish.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
Okay, you know, it's not the same, but the training is necessary.
Right.
Okay, and a lifetime of hearing this, you know, it's like a splinter you can't get out.
It messes up with your psyche.
Okay,
Yeah.
but it's there, and you got to learn to live with it.
Right.
Okay, logically we can know the impact of something, but not be able to do anything about it right now because the consciousness of the larger community and the consciousness of our people ain't ready to deal with that. But for those who do know, the key thing is to have a consciousness about it, and limiting it every chance you get.
Exactly.
For instance, like swearing.
Yeah.
Swearing now is so much a part of the culture. I remember when that's why they used to censor it on TV.
Right.
People don't realize what swearing is. It seems like it's culturally accepted. It's normalized, right? It's how do you say? It's a harmless.
Right.
No, it's not. Swearing, for lack of a better term, and excuse my grossness, it's like passing gas out of your mouth. It's like farting out of your mouth.
Right.
Okay. And what happens when you in a room that's all gassed up?
It stinks. Yeah.
Among other things. What kind of attitude do you think?
Horrible.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So just imagine,
Yeah.
you know, people swearing all the time and laughing, drinking, having a good time. At the
Yeah.
same time, they're creating this other phenomenon.
Yeah.
See, that's called an existential type of issues.
You had to. You had to.
But I didn't mean to.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Ingrid is saying, "Good afternoon."
Yeah.
If you guys want to say.
Good
Hey,
afternoon, Miss
Ingrid.
Ingrid.
What's up?
We also have JC Levesque saying
Yeah.
good morning.
All right.
And he also said, "We forgot everything about our strength and how when we work together we are scary. Jealousy is what destroyed them."
That's true. I agree with that.
And we've also got Basil, who said, "Should black people be overly concerned with Ukraine's large factions of white supremacists in their military and them preventing Africans from leaving the war zone?"
You saw that too. It surprised me when I saw how many black people were trying to get out of Ukraine. I was like, I didn't even know.
I didn't even know black folks was in Ukraine.
Okay. Should we be concerned about that? As world humanists, yes. Okay. But we need to understand the necessary politics of that, because a lot of what's being even projected to us, not necessarily honest.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just have to leave it at that because that gets into another level of
Right.
discussion in
Yeah.
politics. Okay. And I'll talk to y'all about that
Off
when
camera.
we're off air.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But as world humanists, you know, one of the things about African Americans, right, and the African struggles for freedom, it elevated world humanism. Our abilities to want to be free from Jim Crow and want to be free from discrimination and want to
Right.
be free from the things that were holding us back. Just like South Africans wanted to be free from apartheid,
Yeah.
you know. And that's coming out in volume 1.2. Okay, volume 1.1 and volume 1.2 of the newsletter. So you get a
Man,
chance
you
to check
dropping
that out.
newsletters like Jay-Z dropped mixtapes, brother.
But yes, okay, our humanism, okay, our humanism is one of the contributions from our ancient African, from our African religion, from our
Okay.
ancient African religion that we consciously forget about, but unconsciously live, exude every day. You know,
Right.
no matter how hardcore you might be, when you walk past a person on the homeless street,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, and I'm gonna say this, yeah, as a drug dealer, you got to get rid of your 8 balls and your or whatever they selling now, but you know, they come back and flip the dude eating out of the garbage pan a couple bucks.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they showed it in a lot of the so-called like New Jack City.
Yeah.
They were doing some horrendous stuff, and you see it in a lot of the other drug movies. But they buy everybody turkeys during
Thanksgiving, during Christmas.
It's like a Robin Hood thing,
Right.
for lack of a better term. But how do you reconcile things like that? But it's our humanism. It's the humanism.
Yo,
Okay?
and speaking of, and honestly, right, I actually think like even like some of these hip hop artists, right, a lot of these hip hop artists, you know, they do promote the drug culture, right, because they promote it, and then, you know, these things that they've done, but also they kind of have to be held responsible, in my opinion. I always feel like, yo, you guys got to kind of be held responsible because, you know, you was actually selling your people poison. You know what I'm saying? And although, yeah, you might have changed your life, you know what I'm saying, but you owe these folks an apology. You know what I mean? Because you was feeding your folks like poison.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. That is volume. That's coming out in a future volume called Observations of a Racist Scientist.
Dropping mixtape like Jay-Z, like dropping newsletters like Jay-Z drop mixtapes, man. I love it.
Well,
yes.
One of the things that's important is some of these issues seem so large, so existential, so out of our control, but we have to live under them. But see, and here's where faith and belief comes in.
Yeah.
We've seen our people have made genius efforts and have genius accomplishments, sometimes unconsciously. Okay, what was breakdancing?
What was it?
Yeah. And what was what do they call it? Making the sounds with musical sounds with the mouth.
Beatbox.
Okay.
Beatboxing.
Okay. But prior to that, even before that, there was falsetto.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of what we do is still in line with our historical development.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though it's not categorized, sorted out, you know, or stamped.
Mm.
Okay. Criminal activity. Okay, criminal activity. And I don't mean to cast aspersions on anybody. But we're helped, but in on campuses, in our, you know, in some of the lesson plans and lessons when you're learning about ancient Western civilizations,
mm-hmm.
they talk about these dudes, conquerors. They go in, beat up another civilization or country, and then establish tribute. Okay, in other words, you know, every year we want a couple of thousand slaves, we want a couple of 1,000 pounds of gold, we want a couple of million bushels of this grain, that grain, we want access to your roads so we can have like freedom to trade through your territory
mm-hmm.
without being taxed or tolled, you know, TOLLED.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
but do you know what tribute would be called in today's world?
What would it be called?
Extortion. Okay, so criminal activities in the past that's held up in our classrooms as these great institutions are actually criminal activities today.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we don't, and it's never assembled.
Right.
Okay, and presented like that. Okay, slavery should be examined from a forensic point of view. We need to start looking at slavery like it was a crime.
Right.
And analyzing it like it was a crime. And why is that legitimized? Because they're still talking about the fall of the Titanic. They still forensically analyzing the Titanic. They still forensically analyzing the Hindenburg disaster. They still forensically analyzing Typhoid Mary. They're still forensically analyzing that little lady that went around chopping up Lizzie Borden.
Oh yeah.
Chopping up her family. They're still forensically analyzing all these other things that don't matter. But however, great institutions and the great institute, great big institutions like slavery. Well, that was just an unfortunate process of Western development. Let's look at it from a forensic point of view.
Right. Yeah.
Let's use modern science to analyze ancient hurts and see what we come up with or see what we get.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So, yeah, but the so
We got
The-
about
the-
2 minutes. Two
Gotcha.
minutes, yeah.
Okay, so the seasoning process was designed basically to break your willpower. It got kind of nasty. That's why I'm not going into detail.
Right.
Okay, because what do you and see the whole thing about the seasoning process, the tactics and techniques used to break the willpower create psychological injuries. And
Right.
here you have today, we are modern people that are walking around with unhealed psychological injuries that have been passed down through generations.
Yo, so okay.
Cultural infections that now have become.
So really,
cultural
really,
infections.
okay. I agree with that. You know, I'm not disagreeing. I actually agree with that. But I'm thinking like, okay, these things happened like a long time ago. You know what I mean? So you think that like, do you think like we're still affected psychologically by that, or you think is it? All right. The question is that do you think it's a choice, right, or do you think like it's just ordinarily like that's gonna affect you?
I think we don't know the difference anymore. Okay, because to answer your question point blank, we still call each other niggas,
That's true.
and that keeps trying to be normalized. And prior, and I know this may raise some controversy. Prior to the successes we had with the civil rights movement, what I call a classical civil rights movement and the classical Black liberation movement, the world gave us its support in our struggles because we were basically a hardworking, religious-oriented group of people that were prevented from having our liberties exercised by a society that instituted laws against our progress. Okay? But since we won some of those victories, and since we've ascended, and now we have money, a lot of us are doing the same things that we complained about. The same kind of degraded activities, the same kind of foolishness, the same kind of wasteful habits, the same kind of everything that we saw, for lack of a better term, our oppressors doing and were complaining about. Now we're doing.
Yeah.
And have come up with a whole bunch of another set of excuses, okay, to justify that and to say that it's okay.
That's true.
Okay. For instance, one of the things that and don't realize, you know, why a lot of those perceptions of us now are a little shaky. Okay, I mean, look, the kind of basically the reaction to George Floyd's murder.
Right.
We got the African Americans got international support.
Right.
I mean, support came from other parts of the world. Why? Because if you know what was happening with Black people in France, what was happening with African Americans in Italy that were like immigrants, Africans that were immigrants to Italy, you know, what was going on in other parts of like Western Europe, okay, very, very, very similar.
Wow.
Okay, but that's kept. It you know, the details of that is kept like out of the newspapers. Okay, this whole thing about Ukrainian, okay, war is always terrible. The whole thing about Ukrainian immigrants is, you know, a matter of concern, world concern, and rightly so. But we forgot all about the immigrants that got displaced by ISIS.
Yeah, what
The whole
happened to
thing
them?
against
Yeah,
ISIS and the whole
yeah.
thing that was going on in that period of time.
Right.
And see, the way that information is presented to us, recent events are they become null.
Right.
Okay. For instance, folks forget the about what, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, it was a great Occupy movement. Okay, where people set up barricades, okay, for lack of a better term, communities in front of banks that were causing a lot of the economic issues that we're having today.
Wow.
Folks forgot about the Occupy movement. Okay, and that was before Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And even before Black Lives Matter, folks forgot that there was an organization that got really lambasted by the political by the politicians, especially Republicans. Acorn. Acorn got undermined and basically decimated. Okay, created a vacuum that I believe provided for the establishment and implementation of Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is not all that that it claims to be,
Right.
and cut up to be.
Right.
That's another.
It's another
Okay.
story.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But there were other organizations out there that were okay, and Black Lives Matter and other smaller groups like that are what I am terming a neo-civil rights movement.
Wow.
Okay, the classical civil rights movement dealt with certain types of issues, and there's a neo-civil rights movement that basically has reshuffled these issues and repackaged these issues and selling it to the folks right in an entirely different format.
So
The best words I can use.
no, Chaka, man, you dropped a lot on us today, and we actually
That's the tip of the iceberg,
we're
boss.
gonna wrap this up, right? And how can people get in touch with you, bro? Or if they wanted to, be able to. I don't know if you're gonna do this newsletter, like if you're gonna
I'm gonna
blast
keep the
it
newsletter
out.
going.
Okay, yeah.
I just well, my understanding of technology is I'm on a learning curve.
Yeah. All
I
right.
like what I see.
So yo, all right, I'm gonna do this.
But
So
anywhere I can get a list of
Yeah.
folks, I'll be more than happy to
send
email. Right. I'm still learning how to use the other media platforms that are out there.
So why don't we do
Okay.
this, right? Why don't we do this? If people are interested in getting the newsletter, right, they can send me an email, right, or get in, or go into my my social media or into my DMs and then give me their email. Then I'll blast that off to them. Is that cool? That's
Sure.
something that you down? Okay,
Sure.
cool.
Right now,
Yeah.
because
yeah.
we're not looking for sponsors right now.
No.
We wanna
There's
get
none
it
of
going,
that.
but there will come a time when we're gonna need some funds.
Absolutely.
not right now.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So yeah,
I'm
folks.
happy to be here. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
See,
No.
you got me
So,
excited now, and I didn't even have 2 cups of coffee yet.
yo, any lasting words that you want to leave the folks, or anything else that you want to leave them with?
Pay attention to what's going on. Okay, be true to yourself. Okay, and make a positive contribution, because the negative contributions that are occurring in the world, the cycle stops in the mirror.
I like that.
That's the best I can say.
I like that. This your man Jay. Before we leave, I'm gonna make sure I leave you with a quote by the late great Nipsey Hussle. My thing is that I don't give no person that much power over my path that I'm walking. Not one person can make or break what I'm doing except me or God. Live, love, light, peace and blessings. Talk to 'em.